I stared at the empty space where my husband had been standing just moments ago, my heart pounding in my chest. The shocked silence in my parents' living room was deafening. I couldn't believe what had just happened. One minute, we were all laughing and joking around like usual. The next, everything fell apart. "Real nice, Sarah. You just had to push it too far, didn't you?" My sister hissed at me from across the room. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but no words came out. She was right. I had pushed too far this time. It had started off as such a nice weekend visit to my parents' house. Mark and I had driven up Friday evening after work, looking forward to a relaxing couple of days away from the city. Things were going great at first. We had a lovely dinner with my folks that night, stayed up late playing board games and catching up. Saturday morning, we all went out for a big family breakfast at our favorite local diner. That's when I started in with my usual teasing. "Hey Mark, better not order the pancakes. Wouldn't want you busting out of those jeans," I quipped with a wink. He just rolled his eyes good-naturedly. A little later, "Ooh, watch out everyone. Butterfingers over here might drop his coffee cup," as Mark fumbled slightly reaching for the creamer. Again, he just shook his head with a slight smile. It was all in good fun, or so I thought. Just my normal ribbing that Mark always took in stride. How was I to know this time would be different? After breakfast, we headed to the farmer's market downtown. I linked my arm through Mark's as we strolled past the produce stands. "Maybe we should pick up some zucchini for you, Han," I stage whispered. "You know, to help with your little problem." I winked and nudged him playfully. That's when I noticed his jaw clench slightly. But surely he knew I was just kidding around like always. We made it through the rest of the afternoon without incident. But looking back, I can see now that Mark was quieter than usual, a bit withdrawn. I should have picked up on it, but I was too caught up in visiting with my family to really notice. That evening, we were all gathered in the living room after dinner. My dad was telling one of his long-winded stories about his college days. I glanced over at Mark and saw him stifling a yawn. "Aw, is someone getting sleepy?" I cooed in a mock baby voice. "Does Whittle Marky need his baba and blankie?" And that's when it happened. Mark's eyes flashed with anger as he abruptly stood up. "That's it. I've had enough," he snapped. "I'm sick and tired of being the butt of all your jokes, Sarah. You think it's cute to constantly put me down and embarrass me in front of others. Well, it's not. It's hurtful and disrespectful, and I'm done with it." My mouth fell open in shock. I'd never seen Mark lose his cool like this before. "Honey, I was just teasing. You know I didn't mean anything by it," I stammered. But Mark was already grabbing his jacket. "Save it," he said coldly. "I'm going for a drive to clear my head. Don't wait up." And with that, he stormed out, slamming the front door behind him. For several long moments, nobody moved or said a word. The tension in the room was palpable. Finally, my mom broke the silence. "Sarah Jean, how could you?" she said in a disappointed tone. "You know better than to speak to your husband that way." "But Mom, it was just a joke. Mark knows I love him. He's never minded my teasing before," I protested weakly. My dad shook his head. "There's teasing and then there's tearing someone down. Sounds like you crossed a line, kiddo." I felt sick to my stomach as the reality of what had just transpired started to sink in. Had I really been that insensitive? That cruel? I thought back over all the little digs and jabs I'd made at Mark's expense over the years. Each one seemed so harmless in the moment, but maybe the cumulative effect had been more damaging than I realized. I need to go find him," I said, jumping to my feet. I grabbed my phone and car keys and rushed out the door, my mind racing. Where would Mark have gone? I tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. As I drove aimlessly through town, I kept replaying our interactions over the years. All the times I'd poked fun at his receding hairline or dad bod. The way I'd roll my eyes when he got excited about some new sci-fi show. How I'd tease him about his cooking skills in front of our friends. It had all seemed so innocent at the time. Just playful banter between a married couple. But now I was seeing it through Mark's eyes. The constant stream of criticism, however joking, must have slowly chipped away at his self-esteem. I pulled into the parking lot of the local park where we used to come when we were dating. No sign of Mark's car. I tried calling again. Still no answer. As I sat there in the dark, I felt tears start to well up. How had I been so blind? So careless with the feelings of the man I loved most in this world? I drove around for another hour before finally heading back to my parents' house, hoping Mark had returned, but his car wasn't in the driveway. I walked in to find my family still up, worry etched on their faces. "Any luck?" my dad asked gently. I shook my head, collapsing onto the couch. "I can't believe I messed up so badly," I said, my voice cracking. What if he doesn't come back?" My mom sat down beside me, putting an arm around my shoulders. "Oh, honey, I'm sure he will. He just needs some time to cool off." But as the hours ticked by with no word from Mark, my anxiety grew. I tossed and turned all night, checking my phone obsessively for any message from him. When morning came and Mark still hadn't returned or called, I knew something was seriously wrong. This wasn't just a normal spat that would blow over. I tried calling and texting him throughout the day, my messages growing increasingly desperate. "Mark, please call me back. I'm so sorry. I love you. Babe, I'm worried sick. Just let me know you're okay. I know I really screwed up. Please give me a chance to make it right." But there was nothing but silence from his end. By Sunday evening, I was a wreck. My parents insisted I stay another night, rather than driving back to the city alone in such a state. Monday morning, I reluctantly headed home, hoping against hope that Mark would be there, but our apartment was empty, no sign that he'd been back at all. I called in sick to work and spent the day alternating between crying and frantically trying to reach Mark. I even called some of his friends, but none of them had heard from him. It was late afternoon when I finally got a text from an unknown number. "This is Mark. I'm staying with a friend for now. I need some time and space to think. Please don't try to contact me. I'll be in touch when I'm ready." My heart sank. This was bad. Really bad. The next few weeks were a blur of misery and regret. I went through the motions at work, but my mind was constantly on Mark and our imploding marriage. I poured my heart out in long emails to him, apologizing profusely and promising to change. I sent handwritten letters to his office. I even tried showing up at his workplace one day, but his assistant said he wasn't in. Finally, after nearly a month of radio silence, I got another text from Mark. "I think we need to talk. Meet me at Cafe Luna tomorrow at 2 p.m. My stomach churned with a mix of hope and dread as I waited for him at the coffee shop the next day. When Mark walked in, my breath caught in my throat. He looked tired and drawn, like he hadn't been sleeping well. "Hi," I said softly as he sat down across from me. "Hi, Sarah," he replied, his voice neutral. There was an awkward pause before we both started speaking at once. "Mark, I'm so sorry." "Sarah, I've been thinking." We stopped, and I gestured for him to go ahead. Mark took a deep breath. "Sarah, I've done a lot of soul-searching over the past few weeks, and I've come to the conclusion that I can't go on like this anymore. Your constant belittling and mockery, even if you claim it's just teasing, has taken a serious toll on me. I've lost all sense of self-worth and confidence. I can't be in a relationship where I'm constantly walking on eggshells, wondering when the next hurtful comment is going to come." My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. "Mark, please," I choked out. "I know I messed up badly, but I swear I'll change. I'll never make another joke at your expense again. We can go to counseling, work on our communication. Please don't give up on us." He shook his head sadly. "I'm sorry, Sarah, but I think it's too late for that. The damage has been done. I need to focus on healing and rebuilding my self-esteem, and I don't think I can do that with you. I want a divorce." The word hit me like a physical blow. Divorce. This couldn't be happening. We were Mark and Sarah, college sweethearts, married for 7 years. We were supposed to grow old together, not this. No, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. No, Mark, please. We can fix this. I love you so much. I'll do anything. I'm sorry, he repeated, his own eyes glistening. I think this is for the best. I've already spoken to a lawyer and started the paperwork. I hope we can keep things amicable. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air. This had to be a nightmare. But the pain in Mark's eyes told me it was all too real. Can we just take some time? I pleaded. Maybe a trial separation. I'll go stay with my sister, give you space. Just please don't make any final decisions yet. Mark sighed heavily. I don't think that will change anything, Sarah. My mind is made up. I think it's best if we just move forward with the divorce proceedings. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How had my playful teasing led to this? The weight of my actions came crashing down on me all at once. Oh God, I moaned, burying my face in my hands. What have I done? I've ruined everything. Mark reached across the table and briefly touched my arm. It's not all on you, Sarah. We both played a part in this. I should have spoken up sooner about how your words were affecting me instead of letting it build up. But what's done is done. We need to accept that our marriage is over and try to move forward as best we can. I looked up at him through tear-blurred eyes, searching for any sign that he might change his mind. But all I saw was resolve tinged with sadness. I don't know how to let you go, I whispered. I know, he said gently, but we have to, for both our sakes. We sat in heavy silence for a few moments before Mark stood up. I should get going. My lawyer will be in touch about next steps. Take care of yourself, Sarah. And with that, he walked out of the cafe and out of my life. The next few months were the darkest of my life. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office most nights just to avoid going home to our empty apartment. I lost weight, barely eating or sleeping. My friends and family tried to be supportive, but I pushed them all away, wallowing in my guilt and misery. The divorce proceedings moved forward quickly. Mark was generous in the settlement, not asking for alimony despite making less than me. We divided our assets without much fuss. It was all very civilized on the surface, but inside I was dying. I kept hoping that Mark would have a change of heart, that he'd realize we were meant to be together and call the whole thing off. But as the weeks turned into months with no word from him beyond terse emails about logistics, that hope slowly faded. The day I signed the final divorce papers was surreal. How had we gone from happily married to this in less than 6 months? As I watched Mark sign his name, officially ending our marriage, I felt a piece of my heart shrivel up and die. Well, I guess that's it, Mark said quietly, setting down the pen. Yeah, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I guess it is. We stood there awkwardly for a moment before Mark cleared his throat. Take care of yourself, Sarah, he said, his voice tinged with a hint of the warmth I used to know so well. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As Mark turned to leave, I suddenly blurted out, I'm sorry. For everything. I hope you find happiness. He paused at the door, looking back at me with a sad smile. I hope you do too, Sarah. Goodbye. And then he was gone. I stumbled out of the lawyer's office in a daze, barely registering the concerned looks from passers-by as I made my way to my car. Once inside, I broke down completely, ugly sobs racking my body as the finality of it all hit me. The next few weeks were a blur. I moved out of our shared apartment, unable to bear the memories haunting every corner. My sister insisted I stay with her for a while, worried about my mental state. I went through the motions of daily life like a zombie, feeling empty and lost. It was during this time that I started to truly reflect on my behavior and how I'd ended up in this situation. I realized that my tendency to tease and mock hadn't just affected Mark. It had impacted many of my relationships over the years. Friends who had drifted away, coworkers who seemed wary around me, even tension with my parents that I'd never fully acknowledge. I decided it was time to make a change. I started seeing a therapist, digging into the root causes of my need to put others down to feel better about myself. It was painful, confronting my own insecurities and defense mechanisms. But slowly, I began to heal and grow. As months passed, I worked on rebuilding my life as a single woman. I threw myself into new hobbies, joined a book club, started volunteering at an animal shelter. Gradually, I began to rediscover who I was outside of my marriage and my harmful patterns. One day, about a year after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Mark at the grocery store. My heart skipped a beat when I saw him, a mix of old pain and lingering affection washing over me. "Hi, Sarah," he said, seeming surprised but not upset to see me. "Hi, Mark," I replied, taking in the changes in his appearance. He looked good, healthier, more confident. "How have you been?" We ended up chatting for a few minutes, catching up on each other's lives. It was cordial, even friendly, but there was an undeniable distance between us now. As we were about to part ways, I took a deep breath and said, "Mark, I know it's way too late, but I want you to know how truly sorry I am for the way I treated you. I've done a lot of work on myself this past year, and I realize now how hurtful and damaging my behavior was. You deserve so much better." Mark's expression softened. "Thank you, Sarah. That means a lot to hear. I'm glad you've been working on yourself." I have too, actually. This whole experience has taught me a lot about standing up for myself and communicating my needs. I nodded, feeling a mix of regret and pride. Regret for what we'd lost, but pride in the growth we both achieved. "Well, I should get going," Mark said after a moment. "It was good to see you, Sarah. Take care." "You too, Mark," I replied, watching him walk away with a bittersweet ache in my chest. That chance encounter was a turning point for me. Seeing Mark doing well helped me finally let go of the last shreds of hope that we might reconcile someday. It also reinforced my commitment to continue working on myself and my relationships with others. Over the next few years, I focused on personal growth and building healthier connections. I learned to use humor in ways that lifted people up instead of tearing them down. I became a better listener, more empathetic and supportive of those around me. Slowly but surely, I started to like the person I was becoming. My relationships with family and friends deepened and flourished. I even started dating again, approaching new romantic prospects with a level of maturity and self-awareness I'd never had before. One day, about 5 years after my divorce, I found myself sitting in a coffee shop across from a man named David. We'd been dating for a few months, and things were going well. As we chatted and laughed together, I marveled at how different this relationship felt from any I'd had before. "You know," David said, smiling warmly at me, "I love how you always make me feel good about myself. Your sense of humor is so uplifting." I felt a rush of emotion at his words, thinking back to how far I'd come. "Thank you," I replied softly. "That means more to me than you know." Later that night, as I reflected on my conversation with David, I couldn't help but think of Mark. While the pain of our divorce had faded, the lessons I'd learned from that experience would stay with me forever. I picked up my phone and, after a moment's hesitation, typed out a message to Mark. "Hey, I know it's out of the blue, but I just wanted to thank you. Our relationship and its end taught me so much about myself and how to treat others. I'm a better person because of it. I hope you're doing well." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. To my surprise, I got a response just a few minutes later. "Thanks, Sarah. That means a lot. I'm glad we've both been able to grow from the experience. I'm doing well, and I hope you are too." I smiled, feeling a sense of closure I hadn't even realized I was missing. My marriage to Mark had ended, but the lessons I'd learned from it had shaped me into someone I was finally proud to be. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I thought about all the twists and turns my life had taken. The pain of my divorce had been excruciating, but it had also been the catalyst for profound personal growth. I'd lost a husband, but in the process, I'd found myself. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in years. I went about my day with a newfound sense of peace and purpose. At work, I made a point to compliment my colleagues and offered genuine encouragement. During lunch with a friend, I listened attentively without once feeling the urge to make a snarky comment or joke at her expense. As I walked home that evening, I found myself smiling at strangers on the street. The world seemed brighter somehow, full of possibility. I thought about David and the healthy, respectful relationship we were building. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly excited about the future. When I got home, I decided to call my sister. Our relationship had been strained for years, in part due to my tendency to tease and criticize. But over the past few years, as I'd worked on myself, we'd slowly been rebuilding our bond. "Hey sis," I said when she picked up. "I just wanted to call and tell you how much I appreciate you. You've always been there for me, even when I didn't deserve it. I'm so grateful to have you in my life." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear the emotion in my sister's voice when she replied, "Oh, Sarah, thank you. That means so much to me. I love you too." We ended up talking for over an hour, sharing stories and laughing together in a way we hadn't done since we were kids. As I hung up the phone, I felt a warm glow of contentment. Later that week, I had dinner plans with David. As I got ready, I found myself humming happily. When David arrived to pick me up, he greeted me with a warm hug and a compliment on my outfit. I returned the gesture, genuinely admiring how handsome he looked. Over dinner, our conversation flowed easily. We shared stories from our day, discussed our hopes for the future, and laughed at each other's jokes. Not once did I feel the need to make a cutting remark or belittle David to get a laugh. Instead, I found myself lifting him up, celebrating his successes, and offering support for his challenges. As we walked hand in hand after dinner, David turned to me with a serious expression. "Sarah," he said, "I want you to know how much I appreciate the way you treat me. You make me feel valued and respected. It's unlike any relationship I've ever been in before." I felt tears prick at my eyes as I squeezed his hand. "Thank you, David. That means everything to me. I've worked hard to become someone who builds others up instead of tearing them down. I'm so glad you can see that." David pulled me close and kissed me softly. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the hard lessons I'd learned, for the growth I'd achieved, and for this chance at a healthy, loving relationship. As we continued our walk, I found myself opening up to David about my past. I told him about my marriage to Mark, how my constant teasing and mockery had slowly eroded our relationship. I shared the painful lessons I'd learned through my divorce and the work I'd done to change my behavior. David listened attentively, offering supportive comments and asking thoughtful questions. When I finished, he pulled me into a tight hug. "Thank you for sharing that with me," he said softly. "It takes a lot of courage to confront your mistakes and make real changes. I'm proud of you, Sarah." His words warmed my heart, and I felt a surge of affection for this kind, understanding man. As we made our way back to my apartment, I realized that for the first time in years, I felt truly hopeful about my romantic future.